Hello and welcome to the calibration video for the virtual water table. Today we're going to walk you through the calibration process for the table. Hopefully it'll be a nice, easy routine for you. Otherwise, it'll be something just to practice along the way. The first initial thing is when you boot up the computer, you'll have two options as to what two operating systems to go into. The first one is Linux, which is the default option that it'll go into. The other option is the Windows Boot Manager, which will take you into a Windows system. But for calibrating the sandbox, we're going to want to go into Linux. As the computer is booting up and you've chosen that, you'll want to turn on the projector using specifically the remote, because once the projector is mounted, we don't want to disturb it anymore. That may bother the calibration later on once it's actually completed. And so here we already have the computer booted, the projector is nice and warm. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to locate the calibration instructions text file, which is right here on the desktop. You'll want to double click on that to bring it up. The next thing you'll do is you'll locate the terminal, the command prompt terminal, which is right here on the bottom of the taskbar, named as such. Click on that and then it'll bring up this screen right here. From the text file, you'll be grabbing computer code and you'll just be copying and paste. The first two lines you'll be grabbing are the ones for calibrating the connect. So you'll copy and paste that into the terminal. Any coding you put into the terminal, all you gotta do is press enter to be able to initiate it. And then it'll bring up this particular screen with those first two lines of code. Once you have this window up and running, you'll hit F11 to make it full screen. You'll then hold down the Z button to be able to move this green screen toward the center as best you can. And you'll want to zoom in to pretty much try and encapsulate the area that you'll be using for the table. For this first portion, you'll want to have the lid closed because you'll want to have a nice flat area. You will hold down the right click to select average frames. You'll hover over it and then you'll let go of the right click. You won't be pressing anything else to select that. Once that is selected, you'll move the cursor to the upper left and then you'll hold down 1. Actually, I'll bring it over here. What you're going to do is you're going to hold down 1 to be able to select extract planes. And again, you're holding down the 1 and hovering over the option, and then you let go of the 1 to select that. The next step is you'll move the cursor to the corner about ½ an inch from the edge. Hold down 1, and then keep holding down 1 as you move the cursor, because you'll bring up another rectangular box to try and keep that ½ inch mark around the table, or at least around the area. And once you feel comfortable with what you set out, let go of the 1 to select that. And then you'll right click again to go over average frames once again to deselect it. Once that is set, we are going to lift up the table, or at least the lid of the table. And we're going to now hold down 2. And we're going to select measure 3D points. With this, we want to avoid the interference that's on the edge. You'll see the flickering images there, and that's what we want to avoid. But essentially, we're going to want to position our cursor just about as close to the corner as we can, probably keeping that ½ inch mark. Again, avoiding the interference. And for this, we're going to start at the bottom left and hit the 2 button. We're going to go bottom right, select the position we're comfortable with and hit the 2 button. Top left, position and hit the 2. And one more time for the top right. Once that is done, we're going to hit the escape button to close this. And then we're going to bring up the terminal to be able to double check some values. The values we're going to be grabbing from this is our camera space plane equation, and we're also going to be grabbing the sets of values underneath. What we do want to try to check is we want to check that the first and third values of this first column are negative. If for some reason that is not connecting or it doesn't show up like that, you'll just have to repeat the green screen step again. But everything looks good from right here. And so we're going to go into this link to sandbox table folder on the desktop. We're going to double click to open that. And we're going to want to select this box layout text file. Double click to open that, and that'll bring up the information, or at least the space to input the information we just obtained. The first thing we're going to copy and paste is our camera space plane equation, but we're not going to grab everything, we're just going to grab the values. And we're also going to grab the coordinate values that we obtained. Next thing before we save and close this, we're going to want to get rid of this equal sign and change that to a comma. And we're also going to change the integer value of the final value in the equation to 102. And so it should read minus 102 depending on what you get from the space plane equation. Once that is all set, all you got to do is save the document to save those values, and you can close that. And that you can minimize the text and close the terminal. We won't be using that for right now, and we could also close this folder. The next thing we'll do is we're going to be starting our calibration with the calibration tool. So have this in handy. It is also helpful to have somebody else help you out. Otherwise, you could definitely try to do this on your own. It may take a little bit of practice, but there is no problem with that. So going back onto the screen, you're going to want to look for the Run Calibration shortcut located on the desktop. You'll double click on that, and then it'll bring this up. For this portion, you're only going to be using two buttons. You're going to be using the numbers 1 and 2. The number 1 is essentially going to capture the points for you. The number 2 will act like a reset. The number 2 is usually used whenever you move displace sand or move it around. And so for this first point, it is a corner, and just like all the other corners, you're going to want to dig those out because we want to set them as super low points for our capture points. And so now I'm just going to demonstrate the process. And since I just displaced some sand, I'm just going to hit the 2 button. And adjust the tool to try and get the target to line up with the target crosshairs to line up with the white crosshairs shown as on the projection. It doesn't have to necessarily line up directly, but just as long as you get the centers lined up. The other thing you'll have to make a note of or keep an eye on is the target being shown on the opposite side of the screen. For a good point capture, you want to have the target be shown as green. Otherwise, if there's some kind of issue or it's just not reading it correctly, it'll turn to yellow, and that will give you a point that is not as accurate or sometimes not even usable. And so I'm just going to position the tool once again to select, make sure the point is green before I capture it. And I'm just going to be hitting the 1, and then that'll bring in the next point. And I'm just going to move this sand back. And so there will be 3 rows of points, each one essentially following a low, a high point, a low point, and a high point, with the corners being an exception to that, and the 3rd point in the 2nd row. For this one, it'll be our high point. For the high points, essentially you want to position the target to about just below the edge of the table. And then for these low points, you'll position the target just above the sand. Again, keeping an eye on that other target that is shown to prevent that yellow from coming in, and you really want to get that green target. And for our third point in the second row, we are going to dig this out. So once all your points are captured, you'll have these red crosshairs pop up. A good way to test is to be able to move the target and see how those crosshairs follow. If those crosshairs do not appear and for some reason you get the white crosshairs popping up again on the bottom left, it's just an indicator that something was captured wrong, or what was captured is not usable, and so it'll run you again through the process. Otherwise, what you'll be able to do is you can press escape and just start the process all over again. There may be possibility that you'll have to start over from the very beginning, but usually, hopefully that does not occur. So once all your points are captured, you hit escape to get out of the calibration process. And then what you're going to do is you're going to want to locate the Run Sandbox shortcut on the desktop. And I'll move some sand here to be able to view that on there. And you'll just double click on the shortcut to bring the sandbox feature up. And so essentially now what you're going to want to check is build some mounds. Usually the first thing is to be able to build a good mountain in the middle. And what you're going to be looking for is essentially to see if the contour lines line up with what you've built. Another thing to check for is if the water feature or the water simulation feature is working. What you do with that is all you got to have people do is just stick their hand out nice and wide, and you'll see the water being able to flow there. Sometimes it may work, but some people to be able to move their hand up and down. It just depends on how it's going and who comes up. You don't want to put it too high because then you really can't get that accurate reading, and you don't want to put it too close because for some people it may not work too well. But it is a little bit of experimentation and trial and error. And again, just mess around with the sand to continually just check to see if these contour lines line up. And that is essentially the calibration for this particular feature. If for whatever reason you have issues or concerns, something not working out, do feel free to reach out. We are here to help out as best we can. But like I said, it may take some practice. But do take your time to be able to practice that. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy the feature. Any concerns, please let us know. Thank you.